Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Lanzalotti. Thanks for joining today's call. Sorry I'm about 19 minutes late. I apologize for that. Well, let's just jump right into interviewing at Chicago booth, shall we? Basically, today I want to cover a few things. I want to show you what the purpose of the interview really is in case things aren't obvious. Let's look beneath the hood and see what exactly Booth is looking for. And let's talk about the Chicago approach as well. Let's also get into the logistics of the interview, including how to structure your answers. What are some of the questions that Chicago Booth will ask? All right, showing fit with Booth. Booth is a little bit of a unique animal um, with respect to what they're looking for. Now, the items on this page may seem a little obvious. Isn't this what all schools are looking for? Yeah, but once you understand how Chicago Booth, and we'll cover this in a subsequent page, how they kind of look at themselves, you'll understand what characteristics are more important than the others that are on this page. Number one is definitely intellectual compatibility, intellectual ability. Now, of course, they have to see that you're no slouch. They have to see that you have a track record of demonstrating academic success and that you've been exposed to academically rigorous environments. Great. They have to see, and this is very important, point number two, for the interview, that you're an intellectually curious person. Everywhere that you've gone, you've always demonstrated this thirst for knowledge. It could be playing flute when you were 7 years old. It could be electing to go study a more difficult subject or as an undergrad, or holding um, you know bi- you know not going to a slouch school or a backup school and taking a year off and restudying for an entrance exam and then going to, let's say, an IIT, for example. So that those are all things that you may think aren't demonstrating your intellectual compatibility or your thirst for knowledge or your intellectual curiosity, or your willingness to engage harder paths as opposed to the easier ones. But all of that fits in his story. Anyway, of course, point number 300, intellectual compatibility. They need to see that you're able to demonstrate, or you're able to gel when you're communicating ideas and concepts with other people within an environment of debate and dialogue. So you can function and you actually thrive in that type of environment, right? So, and this is all, remember, where's this all headed? When you're crafting your stories for your answers or just any answer in an interview, when you have to pick which stories you're going to talk about or what ideas you're going to cover, prioritize them according to this right here. They also have to see that you're a community builder in or out of the office. They want to see that type of leadership. They also want to see that it's done. You're able to bring people together, even especially under circumstances that are adverse or particularly intense. They want to see that you're doing so, um, not by shouting orders, but by showing deference or respect to colleagues, no matter how different or opposed they may seem. Okay, so here's another thing that may seem obvious. Point four under community builder, they need to see that you understand the booth community. And again, we'll get into that with the Chicago approach on a subsequent slide. And then, of course, last, probably least as well under community builder, a unique perspective. Of course, they're always looking for the finance people, the consultants, the people coming from the Fortune 500 companies, let's say, the traditional feeder industries and companies. But they do like it if you have a quirk, right? Maybe you went on a 2-year mission trip. Maybe you are a huge cricket fan and you played, all throughout your life and you've coached, right? They like kind of that additional angle, as do all schools for that matter. Final point here that they would need to see is career progression. You can't just be treading water, obviously, but they want to see progression beyond the norm. Certainly, you have to be a high performer, let's say, or at least come across as a high performer. But if you are outdistancing an already high performing group, that's what they like. They also want to see great resourcefulness. It's the old, handed lemons made lemonade, handed crap made a crap sandwich, right? And this is not just at work, of course. This can be demonstrated outside of life, particularly if you grew up or were exposed to adverse circumstances. This can be anything from growing up poor, let's say, but it can also be something like being female in a male-dominated learning environment, at university or at work, right? And you're able to kind of overcome these circumstances to outperform. The other thing they want to see too, and this is of course in order of importance, your ability to prioritize and manage your time. I mean, shouldn't all good incoming MBA applicants have that? Sure. But the reason why this is a relevant point, a particularly relevant point for Booth, is because they only have one required class, which is lead, believe it or not. And the rest of the classes you can pick at Booth. Now, just by the way, the vast majority of students at Booth will go through the normal curriculum, the normal core courses. So don't think it's this completely customizable animal. Usually it's not, but they want to know that you have demonstrated when you set off on your own, that you've made consistently good decisions and managed other time and priorities accordingly. And then finally, under career, and this is more forward looking, they want to know that you have a realistic understanding of what an MBA can do for you. If you expect an MBA to completely transform your life and you're going to go from being a basket weaver to a venture capitalist, that's unrealistic. You probably would have not um, received the interview in the first place. But anyway, just know that an MBA can only help you get so far. So that's why career changers are almost universally never rewarded when it comes to getting an interview or getting in. All right, the Chicago approach, and we'll come back to this slide, so don't worry, you're not missing anything. The Chicago approach, and sorry, I barfed a bunch of words onto this page. I usually don't like to do that, but as you can tell, PowerPoint is not my not one of my top three strengths, probably among my top three weaknesses. Anyway, so this is the Chicago approach. What the heck is the Chicago approach? All right. Without getting too much into the philosophical underpinnings of the Chicago approach, basically, it Chicago views themselves as very much for nerds and geeks, I would say, and I don't mean that in a bad way. This is a school that voted a long time ago to give up their football team. Right? They're very much in the books, not on the playing field. They There's this whole thing called the life of the mind concept, which is Booth, or the University of Chicago for that matter, wants to give you enough independence and freedom to explore the limits of your intellect and imagination, I would say. And that's part of the reason why there's only one required class at Booth. But across the whole school, they kind of view this as a place for eggheads, a place for people who, we know these friends and colleagues who all really love reading books, right? Well, that's the type of person they're looking for. Hopefully that's you. Anyway, so you'll see that, there's these, they say they're a business force, right? You can see this up here. We're more than a business school. We are a business force. I wonder how much they paid a marketing firm for that. But you can see here, this is the latest iteration of the Chicago approach, right? This is, they're looking for all these ideas. They have these really nifty three silos, but they're basically saying that, this is a place where we want intellectuals. And there's a quote here on the next page. Again, sorry for the data dump, but there's a very relevant quote here from David Booth, whose name actually is on the school. Wow, I just drew that connection. Kidding. But he said, what's up with Booth, right? Why is Chicago Booth unique? Well, he says it's hard to describe, but if you get it, you get it. But anyway, what he's saying is that, there's schools like Harvard, they use this case study, where Booth, and that works for them, he says, but Booth basically has a more nuanced approach, one that will have fewer followers, fewer acolytes. But what he's saying is that, there's more theory, there's more modeling, there's more academic rigor, there's more of a deep dive into the numbers and into the analysis. And that's why we like these types of intellectually curious, geeky, nerdy type people who love to get lost in books and the numbers and all this stuff. And they like to dive deep. So you can see that there, if you're a generalist, sure, Booth is fine. But if you really like just blowing out one specific area, risk management or pricing, some sort of strategy development, right? You can go hog wild at Booth going down that rabbit hole, because there's only one required class, of course, but because of the whole philosophical underpinnings of the Chicago approach. Anyway, there you go. So just know that. All right, now we're going to dive here into the actual questions, and I'm going to give you a primer on the pyramid principle. Ladies and gentlemen on the call, there are only really two types of questions in life, right? There are ones that require you to answer a story, answer the question with a story, right? And that would be like, tell me about a time you went to town. Tell me about a time you did X, Y, or Z. Stories. Okay, great. The vast majority of questions you will be asked in life, but in the interview, require a what I call a pyramid principle answer. Now, I've watered this down to where some of you who are very adept at the pyramid principle may think, wow, this is definitely a primer. But just recognize when somebody asks you a question, what are your goals? Or what's your favorite color? Let's just say blue, right? You want to give them the answer, and then you want to provide supporting evidence for that answer. You would, if somebody asked you what's your favorite color, you would never start off by, you just wouldn't answer with a story. What I used to walk up and down uphill and downhill each day to school in the snow, and then yada yada yada. Therefore, my favorite color is blue. You will always lose the listener if you try to answer a very straightforward pyramid principle type question with a long and winding grandpa story, right? So don't do that. And you can see when somebody asks you what's your favorite color, you say my favorite color is blue. I love the blue sky in Southern California. I love the blue ocean in Malibu. I love Dodger blue baseball team. When you say all those, and therefore my favorite color is blue, you've already answered the question right away. You give three, I guess, groups of supporting evidence, and then you allow the listener to go back after you're done with your quick and expedient answer to say, why don't you tell me more about Malibu or tell me more about the blue of the ocean in Malibu? And then you can get into that. So it allows for more of a conversation. Whereas a story, right, the grandpa approach, the long and winding road, where are they going to interrupt you and halfway through? You're not even done with the story yet. They don't even know what your favorite color is yet. So it's very much ends up being not a dialogue, right? And frankly, boring and winding if you're not good at telling stories. Anyway, that's the pyramid principle. And again, here's what's your definition of leadership, for example? So every time you hear a question being asked, or you're looking at the ClearAdmit website, let's say, and that's not a plug for them, by the way, but you're looking at all these interview questions, the first thing you should think is, hey, are they asking me for a story, or are they asking me for a one-liner, a pyramid principle type answer where I give the summary conclusion and then I give backup. So what's your definition of leadership? Well, it's getting people on the same page, getting them to see how important they are to an initiative and moving them all in the same direction, whatever it may be. I've demonstrated this, or I've learned this professionally through this role and that role where I achieved this and this. Personally, through my volunteerism at the Fuzzy Pet Rescue, I've demonstrated this here, and by doing this and by doing this. So you guys get it. But that's how it flows out, right? And you can see in life, really, most questions people ask you, what do you want for dinner? You're not going to tell them a story, right? What do you want to do today? Why tell them a story? All right. So, but you're going to have to tell a story sometime, right? They'll always ask you, tell me about a time you demonstrated leadership, which is distinctly different from tell me what your definition of leadership is, right? Universally, stories or story answers in an interview will all start off with, tell me about a time, give me an example of. But here's the thing. Think of the word SCAR, right? SCAR. It's what's the situation? What's the situation? So you're going to tell a story. Think of four parts. Here's the S. Here's the situation I was involved in. Here's the scope of the project, the people, the timing, the duration, just basically the scope of what's going on, right? It's tough, but I know it's tough, whatever, right? Now, here comes the complication. This is what takes a tough situation and makes it worse. This is the whole gasoline on the fire. This is what makes the story exciting for the listener, right? This is what allows you to answer the question in about 3 or 4 minutes, by the way, because you don't get credit for shit that you're supposed to do at work, right? That's just the nature of the job. What you do get credit for is putting out fires, at least when you tell a story, right? So here's the situation. It may be a super tough project. I was an analyst on a really super tough project for a super tough client. Here's the complicating factor. Well, it was me and two MDs, managing directors on the project, and they got pulled off. So now it's just me and whatever, some guy in the copy room. And so that's the complicating factor, the gasoline on the fire, what makes the situation worse. Now your answer, your actions, basically, your actions that address the complication allows you to focus. So you're not going to give an answer that addresses all aspects of the whole project. You're going to give an answer, or you're going to define your actions for the listener that address the complicating factor, the oh shit, these two managing directors got pulled off. What do I do? Right? Well, first I recognize what my problem is. Yes, it's not enough resources. Yes, I'm not getting enough resources. Okay, it's kind of a known, as they say. But I also realized I had a credibility issue with, let's say, there's some analysts running around. They didn't believe that I could pull it off. The client didn't believe that I could pull it off. So what did I do? Right? So you see how the complication starts blending into questions that you're asking and then into answers. So what do? I start building credibility by reaching out to these subject matter experts, yada, yada. And you can see that's represented in your actions, right? And then finally, you'll get to R, which are the results. So SCAR, situation, complication, your actions. Now we get in the results. And there's two types of results. Always start, in my opinion, with the quantitative results. Yes, we completed the project on time, for the sake of the story. Yes, we came in on budget. Yes, the client was happy. Yes, I got a raise. Yes, I was promoted. Those are all quantitative results, right? Did you get it or not? Now, and those are the ones that they kind of, expect you to achieve more or less. Now, here's where the real insight comes with the second set of results. I guess the second R, those are more the qualitative results. And that is the effect that it had on you, your leadership, your approach. I realized that no matter how young I was, I must always make the effort to try to overcome obstacles. I realized that, how critical relationship building is and building trust and yada, yada. So from that point forward, I swore to never, ever, whatever again. So that's kind of when you write an essay, when you give an answer, that's what they need to know. So if you follow that basic framework, you won't tell a long and winding grandpa story, hopefully. All right, moving on. So you can see here another example. I won't get into that right now. All right, again, just to summarize, SCAR versus pyramid. SCAR, they want a story. You might be looking at a little more than 4 minutes. I mean, that's why they don't ask a lot of stories in the interview, because they'd be signing up for a 2-hour interview with how some people tell stories, right? But with the pyramid question, I would say, you know what, it says 4 minutes on here. Let's just change that 4 to a 3. Say less than 3 minutes for a pyramid answer. If somebody asks you what, you know, whatever, what your goals are, I guess that could be 2 or 3 minutes, right? A definition of leadership would probably be less than that if they asked you that. Stories, yeah, probably longer than 3 minutes. Just make sure, listen, longer answers are fine, just as long as you're not wasting the listener's time with BS, right? All right, so next slide. Oh, real quick, let's go back to a slide here. I apologize. Interview logistics. All right, another thing to know too is that at booth, this is not all schools, but at booth, I know this for a fact, the interview is not make or break, right? So why even have it? Listen, what they're trying to do is they like you. They asked you to the big dance. They want to hold your hand. Are you going to hold it back and squeeze it and give them a hug? So it's a face-to-face assessment to confirm the qualities they think yet you have based on your application are for real, right? Do you have one head or two? Just kidding. Do you speak English? Do you look presentable? Do you communicate effectively? Do you come across as being booth material, right? And the interview is not antagonistic. It's usually friendly. Interviews usually with alumni are, but listen, they like you. They're attracted to you. They want you to sign on the line that is dotted. They know you have other options. For example, I mean, Booth sure was been ranked #1 a few times. But let's be real. If you're applying to Booth and you're an all-star, probably applying to Harvard, right? Could be applying to Kellogg, whatever. But they just know that if they're antagonistic, you're probably going to be turned off, right? Because I guarantee you the guy from Kellogg's not being, or the interviewer from Kellogg's not being antagonistic. All right, let's move on. Actual interview questions. Here's the exciting part. The old walk me through your resume. Okay, this is the ultimate story. Now, when somebody says, by the way, walk me through your resume, they're basically telling you, I don't know anything about you. So it is a blind interview. I would bring a couple of copies of your resume to the interview, one for you and one for your interviewer. Um, and so, even if it's updated, whatever, they won't know anything about you. So don't assume that they will not have seen your essays or your PowerPoint presentation or your whatever pictures that you put up. So don't assume any of that. They don't need to, by the way, to conduct an effective interview. So when you walk somebody through your resume, the focus is on what's on the resume. They don't care that you grew up in some country nobody's ever been to before, right? Um, they are more interested in why you made certain decisions. They're not interested in the detail of all your projects. Like one IT project or one consulting project is kind of the same as another project, and you don't want to spoil out your later answers if they do ask you about a important project that you've conducted, right? So just keep it moving, keep it high level. Start off by talking. Why did you go to? Sometimes it's tough for people who have gone to some of the, let's say IIT, for example. Sorry to pick on IIT, but India Institute of Technology, um, because sometimes you get kind of relegated or delegated to a certain major and a certain campus. But as much as you can, you do have some independence. But talk about why did you pick whatever school you went to? Hey, what? And it's okay if it's number one, right? But you want to say, I wanted to go to the most intellectually rigorous and challenging environment that I could, right? That aligns perfectly with Chicago Booth. Do I need to go back a few more slides to remind everybody that they're looking for people who are intellectually curious, much more so, I would say. It's much more emphasized than other schools. But just say, I went there. I loved it as much as I learned inside of the classroom, and it was a lot. I felt I learned as much outside of the classroom when I was at IIT. Why is this? It's because I took on a number of, even though I did a few internships in Germany, Korea, whatever, worked in a lab, learned how to turn wood into steel one summer. I also took on a number of leadership initiatives or roles outside through my hostel, through whatever, right? And I was a captain of the cricket team, or I was, the head editor of the literary magazine, whatever it is, or the intercultural festival that's held every year. And so you basically go through and you tell them, I those things, and briefly, it's like boom, 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 right? You don't have to get into the details. Like you led an intercultural festival, great, right? And you were the head editor at the whatever journal. You don't need to go into any more than that. You just say, these things taught me to live with the consequences of my good and bad leadership decisions, right? I saw how my actions positively impacted my campus. I really feel like I left. We increased circulation by 3,000% on the newspaper. And these types of things. So overall, I developed as a leader, of course, as an academic, as a scholar in whatever metallurgical engineering or whatever you may have majored in. But you go on and say, so when I graduated, I had a lot of confidence. I may have not gone in there confident, or I may have not have gone in there. Maybe I went in there and I viewed everything as zero sum, for example. I just need to build my resume. But by the time I graduated, I completely changed my mentality. I had left a legacy or some leadership impact, or I left campus better than I found it. I was very confident as I moved into my role at Bain. The reason why I picked Bain is because even though I majored in mechanical engineering, I didn't want to be pigeonholed to one location or one type of technology or one type of learning environment or one type of challenge. I believe that consulting would offer me a greater diversity of challenges, yada yada yada. Right? Again, keeping with the theme of being an intellectually curious person, you seek out these challenges because that's how you learn and change and better yourself, right? And that's what Booth is looking for. So then you talk about Bain, and what I loved at Bain was this, and what I loved at whatever place of work was my colleagues. I represented diversity of people and experiences, and they and I had a chance to work in this industry, for this company, for that company, and then when I felt that I could learn, no more, or when I felt that I had maxed out or whatever, I started looking around and made the jump to, where a private equity recruiter came and tapped me on the shoulder, and I went because I was seeking to be closer to decision makers, or closer to more entrepreneurial decisions and people and whatever. It's the next evolution of you, the next challenge. Walk people through it. They're not as concerned about the individual projects or the subject matter expertise you've developed. They're more interested in what it says about you as a person. Why did you do these things? So if you're working for a venture capital firm, yeah, I go all over the UP. I go all over all these rural regions of India, and I get to meet and greet and vet and roll up the sleeves and be very involved with the decisions that the fund is making. Yada yada yada. It's given me a sense of independence. It's given me a sense of confidence. It's given me a sense. Whoa! It's given me a sense basically of of I guess it's given me, because you're eventually trying to set this up, but it's basically it's set me on a trajectory to where I've developed confidence, I've developed subject matter expertise, I've developed a leadership approach, right? I've seen, again, just like you did at IIT or whatever undergraduate school you went to, you've seen the impact of your actions in a very meaningful and tangible way on your work, on these people. Hopefully everyone can still see my screen. Anyway, so that's it. And then at the very end, when you're done talking about work, talk about all the stuff that should be at the bottom of your resume, all the extracurricular activities, all the volunteerism. So outside of work, what do? Well, I'm still involved with the fuzzy dog pet rescue. Where we just raised $10,000 to get dogs off the street or whatever. What a great example. So you go through and you basically, and then say something else. Now, here's the thing. I mentioned this a few minutes ago. Don't tell them about stuff that's not on your resume, like your goals, for example, or the fact that you grew up in a shack, or a camper, that's not on there. So they don't need to know that. If it's that important, put it on your resume, right? But just keep professional. If they say introduce yourself, it pretty much is a resume walkthrough. Then you can introduce some of those more personal elements, but don't, on your resume walkthrough, don't go into your goals, right? Don't spoil out a later answer, because look at number 2 here. I like how I have the bullet points and the numbers, right? Just in case you didn't get it, but why MBA and why now? All right. It's a good one. Why MBA? Okay, let's just think about this pragmatically, right? This should definitely, okay, if you've gotten the interview at Booth, all you have to do is just tell them what your goals are, the short and long-term goals that you defined on your application. Do not change from that, please, because you found Jesus or you have a better idea. Like, don't do that. Rode the horse that got you there, keep riding, right? And so you're basically, why MBA and why now? So here's the thing. This is my opinion and my approach. They're going to ask you these questions. They're going to get to why goals, right? What are your short and long-term goals? Let's just think about this. It's hard to answer why MBA without telling them what you need it for. And what you need it for are basically your goals, I hope. So unless you're collecting paper. So I would say that's why. So there's going to be a discussion. Now, if they want to ask you that question again in a few questions, God bless them. They can ask you that question. But for here, I would say, why MBA? Well, an MBA provides me the management and leadership skills I require to reach my goals, short and long term. Maybe you leave it at that, right? Let's just leave it at that. And that's, I particularly feel, or I know, based upon what it is I want to do in the future, I require greater skills in strategy development.
Hi, Paul. We can't see
Yes.
your screen for some reason.
Okay. Let me see here. Let me go back in here. Screen share. What's showing up? Screen 1, application window. Let's see here. Can you see it now?
Yeah, all good.
Oh yeah. All right. So why MBA and why now? All right. So you're basically saying I need an MBA to realize my goals. Okay. I need to develop the management and leadership training, specific skills, right? So you basically are telling them, hey, I need to develop a certain set of, if you really want to tell them that you understand why you need an MBA, you have to be able to define what I say, 3 areas, 3 management areas, subject matter areas. I need greater skills in strategy development, greater skills in, international business development, greater skills perhaps in entrepreneurship. I also need leadership skills, right? I need to be able to manage ambiguity and risk that's inherent in my future goals, especially in the long term when I want to fly to Mars or send a Tesla into outer space. It's risky. It's ambiguous. Big gray area there. So you say, I need better decision making skills under uncertainty. I don't expect Booth to give me a playbook or the answers. I don't want a program like that. I want to develop as a leader who can lead other people through unforeseen circumstances where there is no playbook, right? And that all plays into the Booth narrative of are you a good fit for Booth, right? And so then the other question, so that's at a high level, why MBA? So why now? To me, there's always only one question or one answer to this question. Tell me what you guys think about this one. It's basically, and this is a very pragmatic answer, I feel. And I'm at a place in my career now where not only know what it is I want to do based upon what I have been doing, but B, the skills I individually require to get there. And this is not something I would have known even a year ago or 18 months ago. It's something I've learned now, especially when you see my career progression and you see all the heavy hitters and big decisions I've been making in the last year and the client vice presidents I've been working with. I see the challenges and the decisions that they have to make. And so it's formulated the vision I have for my career, but it's also made me very honest about what I need to learn. And those are the three areas I told you. And again, why now? I wouldn't have known that a year ago, and certainly a year from now. And this is how you should think. You don't need to necessarily say this last part, but you would say, if you're going to stay at your work another year, it's not like you're going to have another epiphany. You know what you know now, right? So let's go apply. So anyway, now why Booth? Okay. If there's any answer that should be too long. So the resume walkthrough, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes, right? I know I drug that out for a while, but 3 or 4 minutes. Why MBA? Why now? That's pretty quick. Yeah, maybe 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, without going into too much detail. The why Booth. Now probably the number one priority at a high level here is, does the person, the interviewer looks at you and she or he thinks, is this guy or gal really interested? How do I know that? How do I know they love me and Booth? Well, if you know everything about Booth and you display that through your answers, I mean, I'm talking about courses, clubs, professors, philosophical underpinnings of the learning environment, the Chicago approach, right? I would definitely mention that in your interview. If you know all that stuff, then they know you're interested, right? So question 3 here, why Booth and what's so special about it compared to other schools? Well, this is the answer where you should go, excuse my French, ape shit, right? You should, don't worry about this answer being too long. This is the answer that needs to be too long. If you're going to sit there 5 minutes and tell why Booth, they're going to soak it up, right? But you need to bring the house and everything in it to your answer here. So, um, you know, again, that runs the gamut all the way from your understanding. I would start high level, and I would start with what David Booth said, right? Make his words your words as to what's so special about the school. You have to capture that straight from the horse's mouth, or David Booth, his mouth. So you start with that and you start drilling down, right? But even if you don't start with that, you want to get in the Chicago approach, right? And so I have on this slide, hopefully everybody can see this. This is the generic why this school slide, right? And you could follow this approach if you love frameworks, if you get nervous. But let's just say you follow what I believe, and I wrote all this out and dumped it on a slide here for your viewing pleasure. Um, Basically, why would you go to Booth, right? Or any other school for that matter? Well, at a base level, if you wanted to start with the basics, it offers me the knowledge that I seek in areas 1, 2, and 3, or I would name at least 2, right? I require to reach my goals. And then you would say, Professor Smith's yada yada class and Professor Singh's, bada bada class, right? And so you go through and you say that to name electives, by the way, don't name core courses, but name electives. You don't have to name famous professors that. In fact, I think it's better if you don't name famous professors because it shows you really dug into the curriculum, for God's sake. So just make sure it covers the areas that you say you need to learn. Okay, so that's step 1, very basic. Now, step 2, which builds on step 1. Your school provides me the opportunity to pragmatically apply and test what I've learned in class. And I'm going to do that through Field Study ABC and International Field Trip 1, 2, 3. And it gives me an opportunity to test and, figure out what I still need to work on. And it helps guide you and navigate the flexibility. Oh, yeah, the flexibility of the curriculum, right? Because that's a big deal at Chicago Booth. That's what you need to think. And that's what the interviewer will think when you start talking this way. So the other point you can add here under 2, so this is 2.2, is that there really is no better way, outside of class, but there really is no better way than being tested alongside your classmates to start fomenting or building lifelong relationships with them, right? Rolling up the sleeves together. Now, point 3 here, in addition to building my business knowledge and management skills, your school, Booth, by the way, will build my leadership skills. So then you go into the leadership development initiatives. right? And why is that important that you go through some leadership development program other than you get like a certificate or you meet cool people? It's because it helps you manage risk in the long term. And what's up with risk? I'm going into strategy or I'm going into marketing. What's going on with risk management? Whatever it is that you do in the long term, as a decision maker, you're going to encounter a number of oh shit moments, right? And so that's why you say here, no matter what it is you're going to go into, maybe you're going to go work for a jelly bean manufacturer, right? You come here and you say, I want to build my abilities to manage the unknown, what lies beyond, yeah, and lead through others through that uncertainty to the promised land. So now this is where you bring it home and you make it more personal, right? You leave the interview touchy-feely, with a touchy-feely feeling. So finally, after visiting your esteemed school, interacting with students, alumni, and even if you don't visit, I understand people overseas. You should talk to the alumni. Come on. You should, if they show up in Mumbai or wherever, you should go, or what city is near you, right? Tokyo. So go. Hopefully you have already. If you haven't, well, what I would say is get on LinkedIn and email people who are part of the clubs that you want to be a part of. Just get some names down so you can say that you've talked to some people. Maybe you won't discover anything new. So what? You need to be able to show that you're making the effort and therefore want to go to the school and not Northwestern or Harvard. So after interacting with students, alumni, yada, yada, I came away with a much better insider's perspective, more of a personal connection to your program. And it tells me that everything you guys say about the Chicago approach, about being a place for this type of person, of intellectually curious, inflexible, pragmatic experience, whatever it is, I have seen that, or I vetted that from a first person point of view. So, I'm not bullshitting you basically. So that's it. That's the winning logical formula for any program that you apply to, including Booth. But make sure for Booth, again, not to beat a dead horse, that you're emphasizing the Chicago approach. Google that. Google the Chicago approach, right? Read everything about it and base your answer and craft one much like David Booth's answer for that interview that I pasted in an earlier slide. I pasted a link to it as well. All right, short and long-term goals, again, straight up. I put in an imaginary one here, but goals, this is easy. This is a minute and a half answer. That's all it is. Just make sure you don't open yourself up to getting punched, I guess, out of nowhere, sucker punched, because by giving them some wacky goal, obviously you wouldn't have gotten to this point if you had a wacky goal, but don't change it to a wacky goal. Just to stay the course. All right, so let's see what we have here. Where do you want to work? Okay, see how there's specific company and location, right? And this means you also need to think about what you want to do for your summer internship, because they could ask you, what's your ideal summer internship? At a high level, my ideal summer internship is one that gets where I leave an impact on my company. I don't care where it is almost, but hopefully it's within consulting, or hopefully it's within where do you want to company location? If you have impact here, you could always go back to Bain, Deloitte, wherever, you throw it in there, right? It doesn't as long as it's consistent with your primary short-term goal, which is to go work for McKinsey. You can always say, I could always go back to Deloitte and hopefully I can join their strategy, something like that, right? Make sure the company and location, do yourself a favor, go look at the Career Center report, see if that company, for God's sake, has ever hired from Booth. Chances are they have, but go look on LinkedIn. Where are they working? The people who have graduated from Booth and are now working for, Joe Jellybean Company. So that provides precedent, and nobody can ever challenge your answer. Like, you need to know that, so you're confident in what you're giving. The worst is, and I can only imagine when the interview would just say, well, they've never recruited at our school. That's the interview's going sideways at that point. All right, so here's the first story. What was a time when you failed, and what did you learn from it? Okay. It doesn't really matter what the failure is. Well, as long as you didn't bring the whole trading floor down or whatever, something like that, or something that's clearly like, or I stole $1 million. you're okay, right? Because the focus of this question is not on what the exact nature of the failure is, but what you did to fix it and what you learned. Remember SCAR, right? Situation. All right. Well, I was in a tough situation. I mean, seems logical that I would fail. Here's the situation. It was my first job or my first month at my current job. And usually I like failures that are 2, 3 years ago, not within the last few months, because you can legitimately say that you were young and dumb or inexperienced and it happened 2 years ago, so you had plenty of time to learn from it. Don't give them a failure, I swear to God, within the last 12 months. It just brings up a question mark, a pretty big one, depending on the nature of the failure. So he goes, here's a situation I was in. I was new, I was young, I was dumb. My first job, I didn't really know what I was doing, even though I thought I knew what I was doing. And then something, whatever, failed. I dropped the ball. I crapped the bed, whatever it is. And then move on and say, okay, so this is what I did to fix it, right? So, oh God, I'm trying to think of a failure, a good one here as an example, but usually it's around communication. You're too scared to go up to talk to somebody, you're too scared to email somebody, or you revealed too much to the client or to the boss, or you were too passive in how you dealt with things, or you had all the answers and you're in meetings and you didn't bring it up, and because of that the team went on a wild goose chase, and later when your boss figured out you had the answers, or when he came to you or she came to you and said, what are the answers, you had the answers, what the hell is going on? um, then you start dealing with. So those are all kind of good rookie mistakes, right? In that realm spectrum. And so then it's really like when you failed, okay, the first thing you do is you try to fix it. Okay, how do you fix it? Now let's take the bull by the horns. You start reaching out. Instead of being passive, you realize your neck's on the line. So you start reaching out and you realize that all these old people with gray hair at work really aren't that scary, right? Or here's a good example of a guy that he got into more or less a shouting match with a union employee at work, and he worked in it's a heavy industry, let's say, and he didn't think the conversation was that bad, right? But he realized that the hourly employee went back to the union hall and they raised they got all their pitchforks and torches and came for him basically, and his boss was going to fire him unless he couldn't fix it immediately. So then he went through and he had to go in, he had to apologize, he had to make amends, and but basically, so that's like what he had to do in the first hour, first day after the failure, screwing up, or the first week. But what did he also had to do? He had to force himself, even though there was some personal feelings there, he had to set that aside. He had to force himself to listen to that person. He had to swallow his pride. He had to do all stuff. And then eventually it got better and he began to realize, okay, these guys, I'm not going to sit here with rose colored glasses on and pretend these guys, all their opinions and ideas are great, because a lot of them aren't. But at the same time, that's not the point. The point is that I'm listening to them. They feel like I'm listening to them. We're building a relationship that works, that functions. And so over the course of 3 or 4 months, he was able to solve that problem, get things back on track. It was actually from buddy relationship eventually with a lot of these guys, because they respected him for putting up with their punches. I mean, this is the type of environment. I mean, it's like he works at a boxing ring. So anyway, so then he talks about the results. The results of bettered the relationship, got the award, all this stuff. But he said, what are those are the quantitative results. Fixed the relationship, right? It was a 0, now it's a 1. Met the deadline, whatever, right? The union isn't going to go on strike, all these things. But what are the qualitative, the insightful, the introspective type change from a failure, right? This is the most important. Remember, and what did you learn from it? They don't, when they ask you what was the time you failed and what did you learn from it, they don't even have to ask that last part. If you don't know to answer that last part, what did you learn from it? It's not a good sign. I mean, especially if your interview is only in a few days. But anyway, what did you learn from it? And then go into all the more qualitative aspects about how it changed how you lead. Certainly, I was more willing to view things from the other person's perspective. I was more willing to seek to understand the other person before I was understood. I was more willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. I was more willing to, what's another one that you could say here? You were more willing to look beyond, what people maybe had defined as this is a situation. So for example, people's always said, Bill in maintenance or Bill in production, he's got a bad, crappy attitude. So, you got to take a hammer to him, right? But you learn to look beyond that and realize, well, Bill works 2 shifts. Bill does the work of 5 people. Bill has been getting screwed over for years. That's why he has that attitude problem. So what do? You sit down with them? Do you do this? So anyway, so you learn to look beyond appearances, right? And eschew a conventional wisdom or the wisdom of the plant or what other people may say about a certain person and figure things out yourself, right? Again, that's what Booth likes in this situation, or that's the characteristic they want to see. So anyway, all right. Now, let's see what else we have here. All right. Hopefully you guys aren't seeing all these pop-ups in the presentation. All right. So what's that? What is your greatest career achievement? Okay, this could be a story, right? So this is a 50-50 right here. This is tricky. What's your now?
Paul, can you try screen sharing again, please? I think you're stuck at the previous slide.
Oh, really? It should say actual interview questions. That one? Is that the one you guys are seeing? It's hard for me to see what you guys are seeing. It's just the one with the questions on it. So let me see here. Let me try sharing. Can you guys see now?
Yeah, it's perfect. Thanks.
Okay, cool. So it says actual interview questions. Walk me through your resume. That's what's on there?
No, we are at YMBA, why Booth goals.
Huh. One day I'll figure this out. It's really weird. I don't know why it's. Anyway, yeah, it appears to be stuck. This is so strange. Anyway,
That's fine.
so
Just walk through it.
yes, okay. So everyone on the call, the question that I'm covering right now is, what is your greatest career achievement? And basically, this could go either way. You could tell them a story, right? Um, but I would always look to give them more of the pyramid format, right? I mean, you could tell them a story like, so I started this job, it was really hard, but I did all these great things to come up the curve. I was, everybody else was from Harvard and Yale and Princeton, and I was from some community college. I had to come up the curve, but I eventually did. So coming up the curve is my greatest career achievement. Okay, you can take that approach. But what I would say is do the pyramid here. What is my greatest career achievement? Coming up to speed in a new work environment when I was clearly outclassed by all these people from Ivy League schools represents my greatest achievement. Why? Not because I eventually became the top performer, and that's not it at all, but because of how I did it. Remember, achievements aren't shit. Like getting a trophy doesn't mean anything if you cannot explain the process, the meaning in the process, right? You are not the product of trophies. You are the product, as a man or a woman, you are not the product of trophies, right? Or material things, really. You are the product of the process that has got, that brought you there, right? The relationships, the overcoming obstacles, the grit, the resourcefulness, all that experience, right? And so you're basically saying my greatest accomplishment is anything. You could just say anything, watching paint dry, right? But it's not for the reasons that you might think. It's not because I got some huge bonus or a lifetime supply of white paint. What it is because of how I got there, how this, end goal or accomplishment was achieved. It required me to overcome a bunch of obstacles, and I learned because of that, to see the value, the silver lining in problems, right? To go after situations that are adverse, even though they can be intimidating or anxiety filled to start off with, right? I learned how important it was to build relationships, not because, to have somebody to go to lunch with, but so that I could learn from them and they could learn from me, so that I could feel like I could have confidence in what I was doing and feel like people had my back and I had theirs, right? It made work a lot more comfortable. And that really paid off in the 11th hour when I had to turn this in order to achieve this greatest career achievement. So to me, give them the answer, tell them what it is, tell them why, right? because I learned from the process, because I learned this, and because I learned this. A lot of people tend to tell a story here. I just think it's much less effective, right? And time consuming. What is your international experience? Okay, this is not a story, and it should not be, at least. So you just list it off. I would start. You can go in chronological order. That's fine. I think that would be the most intuitive and easiest for somebody to get across naturally and without studying through it, right? Of course, you could do the other approach where here's work and here's personal, right? But you know, I wouldn't just turn this into an international experience. Is also, it's not just I worked in a different country, I traveled to a different country, and it's okay to talk about vacations, right? Or a quick, 3-day work trip over to UK, right? It's okay to talk about those things. But international experience also has to do with, let's say you never left the United States, right? But your parents are immigrants from Korea or wherever, right? You could also talk about that. Um, if you're at work and you're in India, you work with American people or people from the UK or wherever, talk about that, because the whole thing is, why are they asking you this question? They don't care if you've been to Greece or Japan. They don't care about that. What they want to be able to see is 30% of the class at Booth is going to be international. um, how well do you reconcile differences? So when they say, what is your international experience, assume that they're also asking you, and what did you learn from it, right? And don't say, well, I learned that Americans like to get up at 10 a.m. and get off work at 3 p.m. or something, things like that. Are cursory, right? You have to learn, like, you have what it is across all people, because you're trying to find commonalities, right? um, you have to say, what I've learned by working with all these different types of people is that, yeah, people have their own, different working cultures have their own idiosyncrasies and unique habits, right? But I've learned to see things as they do, right? I've learned to appreciate these differences. I've learned to change in response to these. So maybe, you're dealing with some culture, country where you've discovered, based upon your own experience, you're not saying everybody from that culture is like this, that more they're less likely to raise issues, maybe because they're analysts and not because of some cultural thing. But you've just seen this, right? And and what you've learned to do is ask more questions to dig it out of them, right? And basically, the only way you're able to do that is to begin to look at how intimidating or frightening the situation must have been to them. The boss was mad at these guys, whatever. And so by adapting your communication, leadership, management, work style to your colleagues, you've been able to build a much better and greater and more productive relationship from that. But you've also been able to, change, become more malleable, become more adaptable because of that. And again, reinforce the idea here that you're a person who seeks first to understand other people's point of view before you expect to be understood, right? And that's why they're asking this question. So even if you don't have any international experience, you're you're fine. Or I mean, you're not fine, but you can cultivate international examples from your desk located in Chicago, Illinois, or Bombay. So there you go. Now, and so that's kind of the answer to what is your international experience. Now, here's the other thing that they have here. What concentration do you want to take up? Do you have any other? Okay, so what concentration do you want to take? And then there's another question. Do you have any special courses in mind, right? And I pulled this from ClearAdmit's website. Again, not a plug, but uh, what they're saying here is, dude, you better know a lot about this curriculum. You better have charted your whole path. So even though there's a lot of flexibility, for God's sake, you better have charted what it is that you want to do. You need to know the classes, the clubs. If you don't know any of that, it's really not convincing, right? Remember, they already like you. You have to convince them that if they call you up and say, "Hey, will you come to Booth?" You're accepted. You say, "Hell yeah," right? Without hesitation. Um, anyway, so trying to think what else I can cover here for you. If you email me, by the way, and my email address, hopefully everybody can see. I don't know what's up with this screen share, but I'm gonna type my email address in here. If you email me, I'll send you a bunch of materials on the Chicago approach, on interviewing at Chicago, and and everything related. The stuff that I send to my own clients, I will send that they pay for. I will send to you so that everyone can prep appropriately for their Chicago booth interview. Again, I cannot. Okay, so last year, just one. I'll leave you guys with one thing besides that MBA at AmerAsia Consulting email address. Last year, the booth admissions committee, they had I guess a special chat session for admissions consultants, right? Insiders only. Um, and the one thing that they emphasized repeatedly, I mean, somebody straight up asked them, "What's the differentiation?" And they said the Chicago approach. And a lot of people on the call or the chat were a bit unfamiliar with that and the life of the mind concept. But I found it, irrespective, I found that very revealing because that's not something you see a lot of in normal conversations or on the website, really, right? And they pointed to that. So the more you know about that whole life of the mind concept, the more you know about the Chicago approach, the better off you're going to be, because they're going to need to fill out the interviewer is going to need to fill out how well he or she feels you know the school, and you really want them to say they had an excellent grasp of the Chicago approach, right? And the philosophical underpinnings of the learning experience here at Booth. Anyway, I think I'm blabbing at this point. That's all I had, to be honest. So again, email me mba@amerasiaconsulting.com, and I'll send you a whole bunch of Chicago booth interview prep stuff. All right, folks. That's all I had. Suvik, you have anything for me?
No, that's all. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, cool. Everybody have a good day. Talk to you later.